Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the Elevate Your Running podcast. My name is Sarah Vanderscheid and I'm here with my co-host Austin Myers, and we are here to talk about runner safety today. Austin, how are you doing?
Doing really well, Sarah. Thank you. I'm excited to be back recording with you. We took a little break last week and re-released one of our favorite episodes, episode number 2, basically introducing who we are. So if you're newer to the podcast, and you want to learn about us as runners, as people, and how we got to this point, definitely give that episode a listen. It's our previous episode, and it is episode number 2 of the podcast. But I'm happy to be back recording and really excited to get into our discussion today because it's an important one.
Absolutely. And I loved that we re-released episode 2 last week because we've had a huge growth in our audience. And it was really great for those listeners to be able to learn a little bit more about you and I and how we got to where we are today. And I think it was a really great message to continue on as we head into a new season. And if you haven't listened to it, like Austin said, feel free to reference either last week or episode 2, and hopefully you learn a little bit of learn a little something in the process. It's one of my favorite episodes, and a really great one to get to learn more about us. So for today's episode, we thought we would take what's going on in the news and really try to talk through it in an elevated sort of way. So, as most of you know, as runners, Eliza Fletcher was out for a run and she was attacked and murdered on an early morning run. And I think, this definitely brought such a huge awareness to the safety of runners, but this has also been something that has been happening for so long. And it took something like this for it to hit mainstream news. So, Austin and I thought it'd be a great, it's definitely not a great situation, but it is a great topic that we get to remind ourselves that we're not invincible, that going out for a run can be dangerous, and to take the necessary steps to be able to be as safe as possible. So
Yeah,
before we get into our discussion, Austin, would you like to give your elevated moment for the week or the day
yeah,
or the hour?
absolutely. My elevated moment for the week is getting back to running. Honestly, I had to take a few days off last week due to somewhat of an injury. Really just a lot of pain that kind of was a result of compounded stress and a lot of external factors in my life as far as moving and finalizing the move to Texas and really just focusing on things outside of running, and all of that began to weigh on me a little bit. So I took a few days off. I allowed my body to recover. I am feeling a lot better, which is awesome. And I'm beginning to build my mileage back up, work some speed work back into my training, and it feels good. And it also feels good. I think the real elevated moment from that is that I am feeling better. And or as a result of feeling better, it's mainly because of the self-awareness. I was able to say that life got a little bit crazy. I was able to understand that it's okay to take a step back, because ultimately, if I didn't take a step back, that issue was just going to continue to compound. And it would have left me in a worse spot than just taking a few days off last week. So I'm going to continue to be smart about it, make sure that I'm self-aware and in tune with my body, but it does feel really good to be back out there and doing what I think we all love so much, which is just running. So that's my elevated moment. Sarah, what about you?
Austin, I love your self-awareness around that. Before I get into my elevated moment, I just want to share, like, there's so many athletes who will try and push through niggles, and usually those niggles, like you said, can turn into something bigger. And I'm really proud of you for just taking the time off, maybe 2, 3 days off, to set yourself up for success for the next 8 weeks of training for New York versus trying to push through it. Because anytime we try and push through anything, what usually happens? It's usually chaos. The end result is not really what we're looking for, and it can be a big mess. So I'm really proud of you for taking some time off and doing the right thing there. And my elevated moment is I was able to take a few days off. Kenzie and I went to the mountains. We got to live our best mountain life, and it was so great. And I think, or I definitely know as a running coach and being all in with my athletes all the time, that I have athletes running every single day of the week. And there's definitely more important days during the week, right? There's workout days, so Tuesday, Wednesdays, long run days, Friday, Saturday, Sundays. Those are really heavy days as a running coach. But I've had and have not actually taken the time for myself this summer. So it was nice to take a few days off and spend time with Kenzie in the mountains, and it was some good R&R, which is great because, as I told my athletes, between now and like November 5th, it's like pure chaos in like the best way possible. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of athletes racing, and it's really exciting. But part of being in the Elevate community, you get a race strategy call with every race, very specifically A races, which is what every runner is doing over these next like 6 to 8 weeks. So it's going to be a heavy next few months, but it's going to be a lot of fun too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I as you were mentioning how hectic things are about to get, I remember some of the episodes in the summer where we were talking about how excited we were for fall marathon season and just fall running in general. And it seems that as we're now in September, we're in mid-September somehow. That season has arrived, and seeing the weeks tick down for your race in Chicago, Sarah, and all of the other marathons in the fall, it's pretty crazy, but it is an exciting time. I
Yeah.
really love seeing people hit those huge workouts, whether it be a midweek speed workout or a weekend long run. Just really awesome to see. And and I know from experience just how much that elevates the rest of your life as well, and the energy that a successful marathon training session or a really great marathon training week or entire training cycle can really just give you. So it's awesome to
Hmm.
see. I'm really happy that we've arrived to this point, and that's it's an exciting time. It's probably smart that you did take a break, because I know that you have a lot of athletes raring to go for their races in the fall. But as we
Yeah.
transition into our topic of the day, as you mentioned, Sarah, we wanted to talk about Eliza Fletcher and the tragedy of her death on a training run, and also just more generally safety tips for runners and things that we may be able to apply to our own schedule or daily running that can cast votes in the favor of safety. And that's really how I think we need to look at it: is let's take small steps towards a safer run, as opposed to trying to completely flip the script immediately in the wake of a tragedy that became national news. Safety is always a concern. It's just a matter of perspective. Are we going to emphasize the steps that need to be taken towards a safer run, towards a safer life? And one thing that I did want to address before we got into some tips that our audience can apply to their own training is that, I think some of the loudest voices over the past few weeks, and I think some of the loudest voices in general, in moments of tragedy and when things like this hit the news, are the voices that are potentially the most emotional, or at least they're catching the most attention because they're screaming the loudest about it. And unfortunately, one of those voices that it seems like um, has been heard is that of like victim shaming, and basically the argument that you don't need to be running that early in the morning, or maybe you don't need to be running outside in general because it's unsafe. And I don't really think that that's an argument that our audience needs to hear, or anything that our audience has to push back against, because we understand as runners and as an audience of runners who make this such a large part of their lives, that this is what we do. And this is basically the life that we are choosing to live. And it's something that enhances our life to the point that we are going to find ways to have a safer run as opposed to not running at all. So for anyone who may be, just affected, or you're hearing that voice that's shouting about basically, running outside is unsafe, we can take that and we can apply safer measures to our run as opposed to believing that we can no longer run outside. So that's our goal of this episode, is to provide tangible things that you can be doing as a runner, no matter the time of day that you're running, no matter the environment that you're running in, to ultimately have a safer run, whatever that looks like for you. So Sarah, would you like to get us started with a safety tip for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we get to do this. That's something that we can remember throughout this entire episode as we take this into our next training cycle for many years down the road. Like we all get to do this. Men, women, every single person on this planet, we get to do this. So, ways that you can set yourself up for success with staying safe or being safer when you're outside on a run. First and foremost, I think the biggest thing is telling someone where you're going, telling a significant other, sharing with friends or family. Last week in my in person group, we were talking through these same kind of things that we'll be talking about today. And one of the athletes said, "But I live alone and I don't have anyone really to share this with." And I think that's super valid. I mean, I also am in that same situation, right? And so many of us can probably relate to that. And one of the other athletes said, "Oh, hey, why don't you just text me where you're going? Whether it's in the morning, afternoon, at night, wherever, like, I'll be your buddy, your accountability." And then she made a joke that it might actually help her get out the door too. And I actually love that. Like maybe it's like finding a training partner that you're like, "Oh, hey, I'm going out for my run." And then also sharing like where you're running, what route you're planning to go on, because I think that's huge. Especially if something were to happen, and it might not be, something as tragic as what happened to last week, but maybe you like step wrong on the sidewalk and you fall and like break your ankle or something like that happens. So it's really nice to have someone know where you're going and at what time.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety isn't limited to higher level tragedies. I mean, we could be talking about anything. And another one that I think definitely needs to be addressed is just the fact that most of the times, unless you have access to really good trails where you're living, which if you do, that's such a blessing to have. But oftentimes, especially when we're training for a marathon, which is ultimately going to be run on the road, we are training on sidewalks, or maybe we're training on the road. So I think one thing that we need to be aware of is, are we visible to cars or any sort of traffic that's around us? So make sure that if you are running early, or if you are running late, whether that means that you are starting when it's still dark, or maybe you are ending when it's still dark, make sure that you are visible. And that could really come in the form of wearing reflective gear. You could grab a flashing light, like you'll sometimes see cyclists have. And that is something that will at least make it to where you are visible, but ultimately it is your responsibility, because you cannot trust traffic or anyone driving their car or riding their bike. Make sure that you are aware of what is going on around you. Make sure that if there's any doubt in your mind of whether you should cross the street or if you should try to hop on the sidewalk, do it and take the safest possible route, even if that makes it feel like you have to go out of your way a little bit. I know that for me, oftentimes the most annoying part is, I feel like every time when I get to like a crosswalk and I'm trying to cross into a different subdivision or something like that, I feel like there's always a car. Whenever I'm running past someone's house, I always feel like they're backing out of their driveway to go to work. And I'm like, what are the chances? But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to move out of the way. It's my responsibility to either make sure that I'm seen, or that they don't even know I'm there because I got out of the way. So just take that ownership over where you're running and what you're running in to make sure that you're visible and to make sure that you're aware of the traffic going on around you.
Absolutely. It's a huge piece to it for sure, especially if you're not running on a trail, head on a swivel. I say that to all my athletes when we're on a track, like your head should be on a swivel. It should also be on a swivel to some extent when we're running so we can watch out for things. Cars, bikes. In Boulder, it's like deer lately. I've been passing a lot of deer just right on the side of the road. But really making sure that you are aware of what is going on around you. And a lot of times, a way that you can do that is, if you loved listening to music, only using one AirPod or earbud or one speaker and keeping one ear totally open to be able to hear what's going on around you. This is huge because, it might be for your own safety benefit of hearing, someone come up behind you or hearing a biker come around you that needs to pass you. Or in my case on Saturday, a bunch of elite runners that continuously were passing me through this 5 mile loop all day. Um, and it could also be, being able to be aware of other things going on. If someone were to yell something, if someone needed help, just being fully aware of what's going on. Now, I love listening to music and getting into my zone with music while running, but sometimes when you're running outside and not specifically on on a looped trail, music can take a back seat and your safety can come first.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in preparing for this episode, I was running this morning and I was kind of thinking about, some of the discussion points that we could have around runner safety. And I begin my runs usually around 6 a.m. And at this time of the year, it's still dark outside. So when I was running, I was just, paying attention to what was going on around me. I was thinking through some of the safety tips that I feel like would be valuable for our audience and for us as runners as well. And one thing that popped into my head is that sometimes when you think you're out there alone because you're running early in the morning, or maybe you're running late at night, and it just seems like the world is really quiet. And those are the moments that we crave as runners. We crave peace and quiet and just being able to lock into our own stream of thought and feel like the world is ours to explore on our run. Oftentimes when you really look around, you start to see there's people and there's cars that you really didn't even notice until you started to put your head on that swivel that you were talking about, Sarah. So, just understanding that even though it may feel like you're out there alone, and that's something that we certainly crave as runners, chances are that you're not. And that really just emphasizes the point that it's important to focus and to be aware of your surroundings, to at least understand who's around you, what's around you, because that ultimately is going to keep you the safest, is just being aware and having that awareness. And I know a very popular thing for runners and a great safety measure is carrying self-defense mechanisms like mace or pepper spray. Maybe you have like a small taser that you carry as well. I know that's an option. So that's certainly a really good thing to work in if you feel comfortable doing it, if that's an accessible mode of safety for you and you think that may be the best option for you. That's certainly a great thing to do. One thing that I would say is that it's important that if you're going to have something like mace, pepper spray, a taser, that you have it not only able to be grabbed at any moment, like you're able to use it and you're prepared to use it. Because if you have it, it is there for safety. It is there to protect you. But if you always feel like you'll never have to use it and a moment arises where you do need to use it, it's important that you're prepared.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought that up, Austin, because I feel like there's so many times where I hear, "Oh, I have so and so," or "I have a handheld mace, pepper spray, whatever." And over the last few weeks, all I've heard when that has been talked about is knowing how to use it. Because when you are in a situation where you have to use it, you're going to go into flight or flight like only knowing what you know. And if you don't know how to use the device that you're holding, you're probably not going to know how to figure or how to do it under extreme stress, like something like that. So practicing it and knowing how to use it too is huge. And also, if you can take a self-defense course, which will also help you kind of manage how to get out of a situation if that comes up where you have those um, the instincts and knowing what you need to do to get yourself to safety.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Always be prepared and just understand that
Mhm.
it could happen to you. I think it's really easy to have the mindset that it won't happen to us, and those situations won't arise where we do need to be prepared. Even when we do take some of these steps towards safety, we still in the back of our mind can easily believe that it won't happen to us. And I think something very common that happens is a situation arises and the first thought that we have in our head is no way, like this isn't actually happening, I'm reading this situation the wrong way. And if we're really going to take the safest possible route, I think we need to embrace the fact that if a situation arises that makes us feel uncomfortable, where we feel like we are in an unsafe position, we should trust our intuition and just making that agreement with yourself that you are going to trust your intuition and take action if you feel like it's going to be needed.
Trust the gut every single time. And it doesn't have to be with running, it doesn't have to be just with safety around running, just in life. I feel like anytime we have that initial gut reaction or instinct, to really lean into that, trust yourself and better be safe than sorry, right? And I think, Austin, I love that you brought that up because I feel like that's such a natural mindset to have of like, if you see something suspicious going on, like it certainly can't happen to me. So this probably isn't playing out the way it could, and maybe talking yourself out of something versus deciding to turn around or stopping or turning down a different street. Um, also carrying your phone with you is something that can help too. You could call someone in that moment, to kinda help you through what to do next. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I think too, like, changing your route is a really big thing, especially as marathoners, like, even half marathoners, like, when you start logging a lot of miles, it's really easy to fall into the same trap of running the exact same route, and maybe you change directions, maybe you don't change directions. I know when I trained for CIM a few years ago, I was doing all of my training runs during the work week at 4:45, 5 AM, and this was between September and December, so it was definitely dark, and I was doing the exact same route. I was running the exact same course, most days. Now, Wednesdays were my speed days, so it was a little bit different, but every other day it was like loops around Wash Park. Um, and it definitely, changing your route definitely helps from the safety side of things, but it also kind of helps the mind to stay fresh and focused while you are in marathon training and when you are logging all those miles. Now, you should still know where you're going. You should still know how to get home, and you should still be aware of all the things that are going around you. If you have 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe you have 6 different routes that you use. But changing it up is huge. And if you can't change it up, and you do the exact same loop like I was doing a few years ago, like, maybe changing your direction or even changing one street can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you run at such a similar time every day. And I'll use the morning time as an example because Sarah, you were training for CIM. I run in the mornings for my training runs. And if you're running very similar routes, you're running past the same houses, you're running around the same areas, and you're seeing that everyone has such a structured routine on weekday mornings. Obviously, weekends take a little bit different of rhythm for so many of us, but I'll see the same cars pulling out and going to work every single day. I'll see the same people walking their dogs every single day. I notice what times of the morning, usually the last 2 to 3 miles of my run, I start to see a really large uptick in traffic because people are beginning to head to work or wherever they're going to start their weekday. And, at first glance, it's like, yeah, everyone has their routines and that's all it is. But the fact of the matter is that means that they are seeing you as well. And they're seeing what you're doing every single day. Now, for most people, they're simply recognizing that this person gets out and runs every single morning. But for other people, and when we really need to view it through the lens of safety, is that how many people know the exact same time that we are in the exact same place every single day? And how can we just make those slight adjustments to where we're in a different place? And one thing that I would use as an option, as a safety tool, really, and it can be a training tool as well, and some people may hate this tip, is maybe you do a run or two on the treadmill a week. I
Mhm.
personally can find some enjoyment on the treadmill. And if you feel like you are limited to the different routes that you can run, especially if you're running before, or maybe you're on a time crunch in the afternoon or around work, and you're like, I can't drive to a different place to have a different route. I don't have long enough in my schedule. Sometimes you can even save time by choosing to run on the treadmill. So maybe take an easy run or two to the treadmill a week. That'll allow you to get out of that rhythm of running the same exact route. And it could be a safer option.
Yeah, I mean, it can definitely help on the mental side of things too, right? Not many of us love running on the treadmill, and it can really promote some really great mental strength tools to your running training and your practice, and making it happen. So um, it's a great tip. Now, piggybacking off of what you said, Austin, with like changing your route and noticing patterns, Strava. We love to love it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Strava, okay, so Strava shows routes, Strava shows time, shows who you're running with. So ways that you can, kind of get into a different direction with Strava is you can definitely update your settings so it doesn't show exactly where you start and end your route. And I think they just implemented a new tool where I think they're doing it for everyone, but you can also go above and beyond what they've already set for you. I think it's an eighth of a mile or something like that. You can set it to whatever you want. You can also set runs to private, so it's still tracking for you, but it's not something that everyone gets to see, and I think that's a huge piece to it because I know from experience in, like, even, like, Instagram stories, people pick up on stuff that I wouldn't think people would pick up on unless they're really paying attention and if they really want to pay attention. So I think there's people out there that do pay attention maybe a little bit more closely for good, indifferent, or hopefully, nothing else, but they are still paying attention. So just keep that in mind of like, people do notice patterns and, whatever you can do to switch it up with changing up the route, changing up the time, keeping some things to private. It's still going to track your total weekly mileage, everyone. Um, but it's just not going to be public, which is okay. I think a lot of times we get a little caught up in that Strava race. I know I totally do. And it's really not to our benefit if our safety is not if our safety is a concern because of it.
Yeah. I'm
So
really
something
glad I'm really glad that
you're good.
you mentioned not only Strava, but also Instagram. Because I think that, it's really easy to just, without even thinking, throw our location on Instagram, whether that be through stories or through a post. And you're always putting maybe the same time every single Saturday for your long run. You're putting where you did your long run at. And
Yeah.
you don't know who's following you. In many cases, we don't know who's seeing these things. So just making those little tweaks to not always share your location, not put the exact time that you're out there running, just being aware
Hmm.
of what you're putting on social media. And I think that it's also important to express concerns that you have to the people who are closest to you. So if you feel like you are getting a message on social media that concerns you or that makes you think that you don't understand why that person is noticing these things that maybe someone else wouldn't notice or you don't notice from other runners that you follow. Express these concerns to people. Like, it's never a bad idea to voice something that makes you feel unsafe, because all you're
Hmm.
doing is bringing awareness to it, not only for yourself, because when we say something out loud, it really sticks with us and it's something that remains at the forefront of our minds, but you're also then putting it on the radar of the people who care about your safety. And maybe you'll get them to contribute to some ideas for what you can do to be safer. So don't be afraid to voice these concerns. That's a really, I think, large issue that people have, is not only the belief that it can't happen to me, but that we're going to be judged for saying that we're concerned and that our safety could be at risk.
Absolutely. And I think it's, something I've been doing a lot this summer, and it's probably going to be something that I incorporate for for the future, foreseeable future, like delay posting, specifically with stories and like where I am and what I'm doing, because that is a huge thing. If people have alerts on and they can see your stories in real time, if it's, showing exactly what you're doing at that time, like that's a huge safety concern. It's going out to the public and it could be people watching it. If you have a public profile, anyone can see those stories. It's not just people who are following you. Um, online. So that's something to really think about. And delay posting is great.
I'd see, I didn't even know that was something you could
Just
do, to be
post it when you
honest.
get
So
home. No one needs to know where I'm walking or what coffee shop I'm at or where I'm running until I'm home. And then I post it. And then it's like something that I was doing, but you don't actually know when I was doing it. And it's not coming, that's coming from a place of safety versus a place of like, trying to make people guess what I'm doing or whatever. Like, it's totally a safety thing. Yeah.
oh, Sarah, I was wondering why you were drinking coffee at 8 p.m., but now that's solved. So
Never gonna happen in real
not
life.
in marathon training.
No.
So
Bet that is.
continuing with our tips, and I think a really simple one, but Sarah, before we started recording, you mentioned it as, it should be a simple one, but you see that it's not when you actually get out on a group run, or maybe you just
Oh
see
my
other people
gosh.
running as you're out and about. And it's that we need to run in the opposite direction of traffic. Now, what does that mean? That means that you are running towards traffic, into traffic, not quite literally into, but you are running towards traffic to where the car can see you as they're driving and you can see them. You should be able to, dependent on the speed that the person's driving, you should be able to look them in their eye. Now, this is different if you see a cyclist on the road. They actually are supposed to ride in the same direction as traffic, because in many cases they are viewed as a vehicle and people need to treat them as if they are a vehicle on the road. But as runners, we need to be running in the opposite direction of traffic. So optimally, you are running on the sidewalk, if there is a sidewalk, hopefully, and you are running towards the traffic that's coming at you on the road. And that allows you to be seen. But I also think more than anything, that allows you to see what's going on around you. Because if you're strictly relying on what you can hear and your intuition, that's not a very wise idea. You never know who's distracted. And really, I think everyone's distracted nowadays. So just
Hmm.
assume people are distracted. Just assume that they can't see you, even if you believe that they should be able to see you. And make sure that you are always prepared. I know when I was learning to drive, one lesson that my dad taught me was that, you know, you're actually you need to be hyper aware of what's going on around you, because it's not that you can't trust yourself driving. It's that you can't trust the other people around you and the decisions that they're going to make. So try to ensure that you're not relying on the decisions of other people for your safety, and just make sure that you always are ready to potentially make a quick switch if you need to, if people are distracted and not paying attention to you as a runner.
Absolutely, like, take control over it. It's your life, it's your decision, and you get to do whatever you can do to set yourself up for success in situations like this. It also blows my mind. Every single long run, there are people running with traffic, and Austin, like, where do we learn this? Do we learn it when we're in driver's ed for runners, or is it something that isn't really taught? It
I don't
blows
think
my mind.
it's I think it's unsaid. And maybe that's the issue, is
Okay.
that it is
Yeah.
unsaid and that it's assumed. But, when you really sit
So
down and think
unsafe.
about it, it does make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so unsafe to run with traffic, at least because I run, against traffic, but also in Boulder. Um, a lot of the back roads, you're running on the shoulder of the road. So, like Saturday, for instance, I had a 22-mile long run. It was a 5.5-mile loop, but some of it was on like side roads and it was raining. It was cold. I was figuring out what the route was that I needed to run, even though I ran it earlier in the week. Gosh, things look so different when you're running in like 75 degrees, sunny, everything's green and beautiful. And then like 5 days later, it's like foggy and raining and all the things. So I was like figuring out where I needed to go and I had goal pace. Like there was a lot going on. And one of the things was like running on the side of the road, but also like being super aware of the cars and the traffic, which actually was a lot heavier than I was expecting on a Saturday morning. And, I was sharing with someone like, oh, but it's the Boulder back roads. Like, cars just know that runners are out here. But at the same time, do they? Like, what if there's someone from out of town driving back there and like they don't know that all the runners are out there? So you get to, really be as safe as possible when it comes to your safety when running. Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to do what we love, and be safe doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as we wind down these tips, one thing that I do want to mention, we've talked a lot about making yourself seen, whether that be through reflective gear or, like we were just mentioning, running towards traffic so that you may be better seen or that you can see better. And I think another really big piece to it is to bring awareness to yourself. In situations where we're talking about someone who may want to harm us, or someone who, may just want to do something that's not in our best interest, when we make it known that they are seen, that can sometimes change things a little bit.
Mhm.
So, one habit that I know I've heard people adopt is like saying hello, or just staring someone in their eye as you're running past them, because oftentimes people don't like to be seen when they know they're about to do something that's not right. So make sure that you are showing people around you that they are seen and that they're there and that you have that awareness. And worst case scenario is it's just someone out walking their dog, and maybe you make a new friend because you see them every morning and you're saying hello to them. But it is important, I believe, to make yourself seen, be loud, be proud out there, because ultimately that little step could be a difference between safety and an unsafe situation.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, don't we all want to be seen and heard to some extent? Maybe not all of us, but having someone say hello to you when you're walking by them or running past them or waving, or I'm always, guilty of saying good morning at any time of the day. So when I do my doubles at night, I'm like, good morning. It happens every time. Um, but I think it is a nice touch, and I think the world definitely needs more of it, and at the same time, if you can, like, keep yourself safe in the process, that's like a double win, that's a win-win in the black for sure. And one other important thing to note is, run with friends, run with running groups, that's a huge piece to running, right? The community aspect, like, if you have a few different friends that you can line up runs with throughout the week, and then maybe you sprinkle in a few treadmill runs, you do a long run with a team or with groups. I know with the Elevate team this summer, you know, we've had, you know, we've broken up people into smaller groups, and that seems to have worked really well. Now, granted, it's kind of around pacing, but it's still a really nice piece to it. And it really does emphasize the community aspect too of running, which is one of the my favorite pieces to it is that connection with everyone that we get to have when we're out there sharing the miles together.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my greatest takeaways as a runner was my time in Colorado and getting to really enjoy that running community, and working at a running store and going to run clubs and joining your run group, Sarah. And one of the biggest things that honestly running with other people showed me, especially people who have lived in that area for longer than I had been, is that perfectly segues into another tip that we were talking about earlier, which is changing up your route. When I would run
Mm,
with groups, it would either be a pre-scheduled thing that we were running different routes on different weeks. So that would expose me to new amazing places to run, or they would just tell you about their favorite places to run. And then you want to get out there and you want to adventure and you want to explore. And by doing so, you are changing your route and you are promoting safety for yourself as a runner, but also you may enjoy that experience even more because you're seeing different places around you that hopefully are really easily accessible and that you love running. So I think that, we provided these safety tips as a means for you to choose what works best for you. No one expects you to apply every single one of these things to your running. But at the end of the day, all we want to do is cast votes in the favor of safety. We want to be doing the safest possible things for us so that we can enjoy our running and we can remain safe and happy and doing this for as long as possible. So we hope that you did gain something of value in this episode. We hope that you will apply one or more of these tips to your running and implement them immediately. Have something that begins so that you can have a greater peace of mind that you are heading out on a safe run. And we also wanted to have this episode in memory of Eliza Fletcher because it was a true tragedy. And she, as a runner, is a hero for us all. So we do thank you for joining us this week on the Elevate Your Running podcast. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find me on Instagram at Austin Myers 12. And Sarah, where can they connect with you and the Elevate Your Running brand?
On Instagram and Twitter at Sayra, Sayrah Runs Happy, and at Elevate Your Running. Thank you everyone for listening today. Stay safe and happy running. We'll see you next week.